We have with us today on our panel 3 carefully selected panelists who will share their knowledge, experience, and insights on this topic. Their detailed profiles, as Kamala would have mentioned, was circulated in a booklet to everyone, but allow me to please briefly introduce the 3 of them, and then we will get right into our presentation and discussions. So first we have Ms. Rachel Welch Phillips. Rachel is a partner in the Trinidad and Tobago office of Denton's Delany, head of the ESG and Sustainable Finance Practice, and a member of the Regional Corporate and Commercial Practice Group. She holds an undergraduate degree in environmental policy and a master's in philosophy. So we welcome Rachel to the panel. We also have Ms. Julie Thompson James, who is an attorney at law and founder of Q Corporate Support Limited. Julie's experience spans both the public and private sector, and she holds a Bachelor of Laws, as well as a Certificate of Legal Education and a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Business Administration. She has also published several articles, inclusive of the role of the Corporate Secretary in the 21st century, which I believe she will have a lot of insight for us on this topic today. We also have Mr. Ermath Harrington, who is an international business and capacity building consultant, founder and managing director at Harkon Group based in Trinidad and Tobago. He serves currently as a board member of the Board of Trustees of the Guardian Neediest Cases Fund, is a member of the Council of the University of the West Indies, and chair of the Chancellor's Governance Recommendations Implementation Committee of the University of the West Indies. So these are our 3 panelists, and we welcome them on board. Our discussions during Governance Week are meant to facilitate learning and encourage knowledge transfer. So whilst each presenter shares their point, I would like to invite our attendees to continue with sharing your questions and comments in the chat. However, we will open the floor for people to actively voice their questions and contributions. So without further ado, let us start with Rachel. Rachel?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. And thank you all for taking the time to attend. This is a really, really important topic, and I hope that this panel will provide some very practical insights that you can take away with you in participating in what is a common responsibility to people and the planet. So why are we here and what are we talking about? So as we navigate the challenges of the 21st century, recognizing that generations born from about Gen X onwards, we're talking millennials onwards, have been born into a world in crisis, a world that the science has shown is in crisis, and a world that we are feeling quite physically is in crisis. It has become increasingly evident that businesses have to play a part in the solutions to these crises. To do so, what they must do is embrace principles of sustainability and circular economy. So what is this for? Well, first, the tale as old as time, financials. To ensure the long-term success of a business, there is a real financial underpinning to getting on board with a sustainability journey and understanding the risks to your business of environmental, social, and governance practices, and the risks of your business to environmental and social factors. The second is the desire to contribute positively to people and the planet, particularly in this region, in the Caribbean, which is an unregulated environment, largely when it comes to ESG and matters of sustainability disclosures. What we are seeing is a private sector with an appetite to do the right thing. And I think that is something we should really commend ourselves for, and we by all means want to continue the momentum of that wave in this region by participating and collaborating together in what is a common responsibility. But as millennials and younger generations occupy more space in our economy, sustainability and circular economy are no longer optional considerations. They are simply a matter of business survival. So let's address the elephant in the room first to begin. The undeniable science shows the pressing need for these practices in our world, sustainable practices, that is. From an environmental perspective, the unprecedented environmental challenges of climate change, resource depletion, and pollution means that it really is high time that businesses take ownership of their impact. And by ownership, I mean accountability, transparency, and public disclosure of their impact on people and the planet. Now, sustainability encompasses a very broad range of principles and practices which aim at minimizing negative impact while creating long-term economic value. So how do you minimize the unascertainable? You first have to know what it is, right? You first have to understand what is my impact on people and the planet. And this is where the leadership of a business has a lot to say and a big role to play. But sustainability is not just a moral imperative, it is also a business opportunity. Many people speak in this space of sustainability as some sort of economic burden or some sort of resource burden on the business or time constraining burden on the business. It should really be viewed on the flip side. It should be viewed as a business opportunity where companies, because it is proven time and time again that companies that embrace sustainability often enjoy enhanced brand reputation, improved stakeholder relationships, and increased operational efficiency. Think of it this way: the better you know yourself and your impact on the world, the better you can run your business. You can optimize your resource use. You can minimize waste. These are all things that also cut costs and improve your bottom line. The reality is we have to look at sustainability through the lens in which we operate, and we operate in a capitalist world. We operate in a world where the financial bottom line is paramount. So we cannot be discussing sustainability without also discussing the impact on our bottom line. But let's delve into the concept of circular economy for a moment. Traditional linear economic models follow a take, make, dispose approach to resources, which depletes the resource at its source and creates a massive amount of waste, which we as a planet are no longer able to accommodate. So in contrast, circular economy is thinking a different way about resource use. So we are decoupling economic growth from resource consumption by designing ways to cut out waste and keep products in use for as long as possible. So the circular economy presents a great opportunity for innovation, job creation, and sustainable growth. So what do corporate secretaries and directors need to know and understand about sustainability and the circular economy? Well, first, they need to know enough to encourage the adoption of best practice. So knowledge, training, understanding is truly essential as a starting point to know, what are we trying to achieve? What is the objective, right? At board level, there are often policy statements that are made, which by nature are very overarching and comprehensive in their approach. But the corporate secretary role is a very practical one in an organization. It's about the hows. It's about the what next. It's about the driving of action. Therefore, as a corporate secretary, it is very much your responsibility to drive that agenda by understanding what that policy means in practice, assigning responsible parties to the action that needs to be taken, and really being accountable for the meeting of deadlines, timelines, and compliance with both internal and external policy factors. So starting with education and awareness, that includes workshops, conferences like we have here, and also sharing of information, having conversations with each other. Those of you who are here today and are attending Governance Week and learning valuable information should take the duty and responsibility to share it with those around them, whether that's your professional community or your personal network. We can't leave anyone behind in this journey. So this is not proprietary information. We are all here because we all need to know what this is all about. So corporate secretaries and directors can also seek partnerships and collaborations. Again, this has to be a joint effort. We cannot achieve this on our own. So collaborating with organizations like CCGI, experts in the field of sustainability, stakeholders such as NGOs, environmental consultants, industry associations, these are all valuable partnerships that can help you and the company that you work with and for to drive the sustainability agenda forward. It's also important to view sustainability and circular economy as a system, not a project. Projects tend to be sort of start to finish. Here's the project start date, here's the project end date. Sustainability should be a journey that is constantly ongoing until you can prove you have no adverse impact left, right? Every objective that's met needs to be redone, right? To achieve the next step. Everything needs to be progressive in your sustainability journey. Not because everything needs to remain in the field of aspirational ambitious. No, absolutely, you need targeted action that has its own timeline and deadline. But the sustainability journey as a whole should be viewed as a new way of doing business, not as an initiative that has a start and a finish. Corporate secretaries and directors can ensure that sustainability considerations become systemic by embedding them in the existing fabric of an organization. Resist the urge to create a sustainability department that sits on its own and gets isolated for being uncool. Embed sustainability into strategic planning. risk management, reporting. Set clear goals, measure and monitor performance, disclose information transparently so both your public and your internal stakeholders can hold you accountable for it. That's really when you put your money where your mouth is. So lastly, I think the last point I will make is that sustainability throughout the organization is vital as an aspect of culture. So fostering a company culture of sustainability is integral and is another very, very important role of the corporate secretary and the directors. Being champions of sustainability, actively encouraging employee engagement and involvement along the journey. Promote the shared sense of responsibility, provide training and resources across the business, and empower your employees to contribute to what is a joint purpose. As an ESG practitioner, I'm often asked by clients, what's the biggest benefit you rarely see out of building ESG frameworks and starting the sustainability journey? And what research has shown time and time again across the globe is that the biggest benefit to a company that adopts this approach is employee retention. Employees want to work for a company that is showing itself to do the right thing. Retention is a great cost saving as well. So even if that was the only benefit of your ESG framework, it will be worth it. Hiring and retraining staff and losing experienced staff is incredibly expensive. So in conclusion, developing competence in sustainability and circular economy is no longer an option, but a necessity. So embracing sustainability allows a company to mitigate environmental risk and seize new opportunities for growth and innovation. As leaders in our organizations, it is our responsibility to drive this transformation, be inclusive in our approach, and pave the way for a more sustainable future. Thank you very much, Nikisha.
Thank you, Rachel. That was very insightful and deep. What we will do is before we cross and interact with each other, we'll hear what everybody has to contribute on the topic. So we'd like to move to Julie now.
Good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure to be here, and let me commend Kamala and team for bringing us all in the region together to share and to be infused with respective knowledge. Rachel, thank you so much for that context setting in relation to, what is required, what's here, and how we need to pivot to make ourselves relevant as company secretaries. And so my own contribution to the panel discussion this afternoon is to give some practical tips. I think Rachel had a great context setting. And so as a company secretary, many of you are on this afternoon, you know that you play a critical role, a role that has expanded beyond the traditional company secretarial role. In fact, it now requires a different set of skills and a different mindset shift. I see the role having evolved in quite an interesting way. And this statement that I just made is true and applicable both to an in-house company secretary employed to a large organization or to an external service provider. The same holds true. What I would share with you this afternoon is, first of all, if you are going to develop competence and be relevant and influential in the support that you provide to the board, I strongly recommend that you learn and understand your client's business, the industry, the community, the customers, its employees, the products it offers, and the services. You have to have a strong command of your client's business if you are going to be effective in what's required to sustain this business beyond your generation and for its long-term financial viability. So practically immerse yourself in that knowledge, in that industry, and there you will find the context and relevance of that company. In fact, in the United States, there is a term that's coined, and I rather like it. At first, when I heard it, I pondered, what does it mean? It is corporate purpose. And I think we can enshrine the discussion into those two words, corporate purpose. Know your company's corporate purpose. And the corporate purpose requires your company and companies to act responsibility in the execution of delivery of services and products. And so immerse yourself in the knowledge of the corporate purpose. Understand the drivers of sustainability for that company and for that industry and for that community. Very important. They are, of course, financial drivers for sustainability, and there are non-financial drivers which ultimately impact the company financially. Understand the drivers of sustainability for that company. Very important. And those drivers can be bucketed in environmental drivers, social drivers, governance drivers, and drill down into each category. Are you feeling the mindset? We're not just taking minutes and appearing and arranging board meetings. Are you feeling the shift? I hope you are. Embrace continuous governance developments. Governance, international best practices are moving at a rapid rate. We are now everywhere in the world embracing and facing complex regulatory requirements for every industry. Some more complex than others. In the region, we are facing exchange rate impacts, inflationary impacts. We need to embrace the applicable laws and regulations that impact the company that we're supporting and the industry. There are changes in laws that will change how that company operates. Changes in regulations, even in relation to how a product is produced. Licensing requirements, similarly, and what are the macroeconomic conditions in which this company is operating. These are all very critical areas as you pivot and infuse yourself with key competence as a corporate secretary. Now, once you've harnessed all of this information, and might I add, it takes time. It certainly does take time, but make it your business to know your company's business for you to be effective. Once you are now armed with these key competencies, this key knowledge, and it's evolving, it's a journey, it's not a destination. Once you're now armed with these key competencies, you become influential and to lead. You are the governance advisor to the board and ultimately to that company. You have now positioned yourself as a key influencer. How do you leverage that influential position you have not just now occupied? Well, the first thing I would say, and it has been echoed before, infuse that now into how you support and provide governance advice to your board of directors. You do that by training, creating awareness. You know, there are times when there are new governance practices that emerge, and you share it with your chair, you share it with your board, you're suggesting that there be a training, and you get a yawn, you get a nod. It's lukewarm, it's boring, nobody wants to hear about it. It's incumbent on you to make it exciting. And always remember that if you are going to have influence in an organization, yes, it's profit driven, and yes, the organizations may or may not be, receptive to sustainable practices. But once you can translate the embrace of sustainable practices into dollars and cents, you have the ears of the chairman, the board, and the executive management. So please use your position to have director training and awareness and education and the changes in law, the governance requirements, the international best practices that impact your corporate purpose and sustainability. This is your influencing opportunity and the opportunity to make a difference in the company that you're providing governance, advice, and support to. The second thing I would comment to you is you need to have teeth, or the organization needs to have teeth. So I would expect, as our corporate secretary armed, you're going to spearhead now and lead with the chairman and executive management. Here are some draft policies in relation to sustainability that we need the board to approve and management to implement. So you are going to spearhead. These are the policies that are required. And this is how we drill it down to management. And this is how we hold management accountable. And these are the reports that will come to the board to demonstrate to the board that it is fulfilling its oversight responsibilities, because we have the policies in place And here are how we're benchmarking our progress in relation to these particular sustainability requirements. Very, very important. And may I just pause here to comment to you, the IFC website. I found a really good, solid sustainability policy that you may want to have a look at. So I commend it to you to have a look at how that policy is shaped. Mind you, it is at a level where when they invest in countries, and certainly they do invest in countries within the region, it's a governmental requirement, but then you can extrapolate and drill that down into, if you are a private sector entity or a government body, the same principles would be applicable. So may I invite you to just glance at that for some perspective. Practically, you can now shape your board agenda as well. Where on your board agenda are you creating a space holder for discussion on sustainability practices? Where on the agenda or in the operations report or the CEO's report are you seeing these issues coming out in relation to the products that you produce or the services that you offer? Do your contracts extend to making demands on your own customer base or clients for the way in which they should operate responsibly with your product or responsibly with the environment? Are you drilling down to that extent? So you need to shape your board agenda so there's some accountability and reporting at the board level in terms of to what extent and to what end does the sustainability practice start and stop, and how are we doing with it? You want to be able to have the discussion at the board level. And so in having the discussion at the board level, shape the agenda. Time to time, your board will have vacant seats. Or from time to time, you should be doing a skills gap analysis for your board of directors. Do you have the right skill sets on the board based on international best practices in governance, sustainability, the circular economy? Do we have the right person sitting at the table to contribute meaningfully to the discussion and understand the topic and where this company is going with its corporate purpose? You have the opportunity as company secretary, solid, sage advisor to the board to say, we are coming up for a round of rotation. I have done a skills gap analysis of the board. These are the current skill sets that we have present, but in terms of directionally where we need to go, we should infuse with these skill sets, and these are the reasons why. And here are resumes of persons who I think would be ideal given where we need to be. That's how you lead and influence that discussion. You may even find too that based on the type of company that you're leading, and I say leading because a governance advisor is a leader, that you may want to say to the board, I think we should constitute a sustainability committee or a product committee, product liability committee, or some other technical committee whose remit includes sustainability practices. It could also be a management committee or a board committee. You decide, but there should be some evidence demonstrated either in the organizational structure or at the board governance structure that is sending and telegraphing and meaningfully executing on sustainability and sustainable practices for this corporation or this company or this government body or this charity. Very important. From time to time, when we are arranging board meetings, the submissions from the CEO, the CFO, or other so-styled executives come to us as company secretaries to compile, to dispatch to other directors for review in preparation for board meetings. I always say to you, and I will leave the tip with you, make it your business to review those memoranda, those documents that are being furnished at the board level. You can identify, does this memo to the board give it background on the transaction or the initiative or the decision to be made, take into account relevant matters? Does this decision fit with our corporate purpose? While you may not feel comfortable going back to the author of that memorandum to make adjustments, you can say to your CEO or your chair, when this matter comes up for discussion, equip yourself so that if they ask about, does this violate any environmental laws? Does this fit into our corporate purpose? Of course, the corporate purpose must be articulated, well known, clear vision for all. You prepare the chairman to answer that question, or the CEO to answer the question. Do you see the shift I'm talking about and how you lead and influence and infuse? I hope you're feeling the shift away from what was to what is and what should be, as you are the governance advisor. Strategy formulation for the company. On an annual basis, most companies have a strategy meeting. And those strategy discussions look at different buckets for sustainability: revenue generation, product development, optimal cost, optimizing costs. They may look at talent retention and management. While you sit in that strategy meeting, may I ask you to raise, where is the bucket for corporate purpose and corporate sustainability? And what does the strategy for that look like for our employees, for company, for clients, for products? Place those discussions at the table so that minds will now be affixed and applied to that bucket which was absent before. You have no cause to be present. And so when that formula, that strategy is formulated and that vision is presented to the board for approval and presented to the company as a whole and as a team for execution, you have just inculcated sustainability in that company's DNA, because that strategy will now be executed and the board will get, usually on a quarterly basis, an update on strategy execution, which includes or ought to include updates on sustainability execution. Are you seeing the shift? I hope you are. You are a leader, an influencer. You are a governance advisor. No longer a minute taker. You are a leader in that organization, a sage advice and governance advisor to the board and to the management. You may want to consider, I mentioned this before, but I'll just say, you may want to consider environmentalists on your board. You may also want to consider, of course, with partnerships, as Rachel mentioned before, how a company can operate a little differently. So there's an extent to which a corporate secretary can high level and with accountability start to influence the culture of an organization. And then a momentum develops, and then you leave it to management now to come up with ideas to participate in what sustainable practices look like. Let me pause here and just give an example. Yes, I have a passion for the financial industry, having served in it for quite a number of years. A quick example I wish to share with you. So let's say Bank A has, as part of its corporate purpose, being very responsible at the environmental level. In and of itself, that bank or that financial institution has its own governance practices, and they really have very little. They may have a branch footprint, and they're very conscious in how they catch their rainwater. They may have volunteers who do beach cleanup or going to schools to teach children about, to be environmentally conscious. They may do a number of those initiatives. They may have solar panels on the roof of those branches that generate power. They use some and the rest they sell back to the grid of the power and light company and earn a little revenue there. But does it really stop there? No, it does not. Why? That bank, those financial institutions, they lend money. They lend money to individuals and they lend money to companies. They lend money to companies who manufacture. They lend companies money to come up with new products. They provide working capital to facilitate a number of things. ought not, that bank or that financial institution ought to trickle down the same thing they hold dear at the company level to the client level? Yes, they should. How do you do that? Simple. So if you are giving a commercial loan to a client of yours, you have contractual arrangements with that particular client. You as company secretary may also be general counsel, as well as you may not. But here is an example, just applicable, I'm sharing it. So in that, or in those commercial loan agreements, I'm expecting to see a provision, a condition precedent, a representation, a warranty that requires that particular client, having had the resources obtained from the bank via a loan or a bond, if it's a capital market entity, to use those funds responsibly in relation to the environment in the community in which they're operating. You better believe that that company will make that representation and keep that representation and warranty for the tenure of the loan, because it's a condition. If it's not met, it's an event of default. And that is how we keep companies compliant and conscious about the environment and extend it to our client base. I commend it to you, and those are my few practical kernels for you to percolate on this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much for that contribution. Ermath?
Thank you very much, Nakisha. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon to the good people of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, the participants. I am sitting here and I am listening. I've been listening since this morning. And of course, you know, with my lead-in being the very capable Rachel and Julie, I'm now feeling like a participant more than a panelist, which means that my presentation should be very short because they've more or less, you know, done a lot of justice, and even in the prevailing sessions, very rich, very fertile input indeed. So as we continue this discussion thread on competencies, you know, so unlike most of you all, I'm not an attorney, but I've been in every probably single part of the DNA of organizations for the last 20 years. So I have what I would call a panoramic perspective of most things. I've actually sometimes had to advise attorneys, believe it or not, but that's a separate conversation for another panel. But I want to start by getting to the personal competence level, just saying briefly, and I will come back to that. So you as a corporate secretary or director, you would recognize that your breadth and scope of what defines you as a corporate secretary has now greatly and radically expanded. So essentially, you are now less of the legal person / administrative legal servant to the board, and you are more, as Julie would have affirmed, the board advisor. And so from a very personal, competent level, you have to assert that and demonstrate that enhancement and graduation in your knowledge base and your knowledge scope. The graduation in knowledge base and knowledge scope is not simply a function of regurgitating the latest in vogue terminologies. Sustainability and ESG, that's the in vogue terminologies. It reminds me of when Balanced Scorecard first came out, and TQM, and the dot-com boom, and all of these things. And everybody parrots it all over the place, and they have the conferences and the, you know, whatever. But there's no substance and depth to that. So I approach a director, I approach a CEO, I approach a corporate secretary at a function, or we're at the beach, or probably at the double stand. And, you know, I say, hey, you know, they say to me, hey, we're doing sustainability. I say, yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So what's your triple bottom line look like? And I get crickets. But they're doing sustainability and ESG. What's your material impact? What are your levels of impact? What are the jurisdictional implications of that? And I get crickets. So I want to start by that personal competence level. You got to show up mentally for it. That's the first thing. So in my presentation, I want to talk really about 3 competence levels or 3 competence areas. Yep. The first is the knowledge competency area. The second is the communication competency area. And I will come back to the personal competence area. Some of you all may get very uncomfortable on that third part, but still, you know, CGI already has your money, it's in the bank. So I guess, you know, it's a refund policy, but let's go at it. Yep. So knowledge competencies. So you have, that will comprise essentially the knowledge of what sustainability is and what the circular economy is, and not the parroted version of what the textbook or Google tells you, but you have to have that immersive knowledge, that subatomic knowledge that you can dissect, drill down from the conceptual area all the way down to what I call where the rubber meets the road. And as we always say, the devil is always in the details. So just by way of example, now permit me, I like to tell stories. So about 15 years ago, before everybody had a master's in sustainability and ESG, I was actually part of this movement when I served at the World Bank at the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, and we were developing, it didn't become the Vogue name yet. We didn't have Dr. Broadland's report of 87 as yet. And so I asked the council CEO in council session in DC, all the global presidential advisors there, put up my hand, this dude from Trinidad, Ermath, addresses the council and asks the question, what does we talk about purpose statement, right? So their purpose statement back then was to improve global environmental benefits. So I asked, what does that mean? I spent 6 years there, nobody ever answered that question. Yet, since the Earth Summit in 1992, we have spent in the billions of dollars trying to improve the environment, but there seems to be an issue where the level of improvement in the environment varies inversely to the amount of money that's being spent. But in companies, what do we do? We assign budgets. First it was CSR. So look how much money we're spending on, you know, buying laptops for the children and cutting the lawn, the roundabouts and what. So they come to me with that and I say, so what? And so I have introduced actually a concept in this sustainable ESG thing. I haven't copyrighted it as yet. So if I hear it anywhere else outside of here, I'll know where it got to. My concept is simply this. So what? So you spend money doing this, so what? So you've invested, so you hired a chief sustainability officer, so what? The point is, unless that knowledge competency backs the activity culture, then we will get nowhere and we will get nowhere very quickly. Now, with respect to the circular economy, again, nice, you know, elimination of waste, circulation of products, rejuvenation of nature, it sounds okay, good. But imagine you go to a quarry manager after they've bombastically demolished the hill. He says, so what are your plans for rejuvenation? And you get crickets. And then he says, oh, you know what? We'll come and plant some hibiscus. And you say, wait, hold up, dude. You can't do that. There's a difference between exotic species and endogenous species. So you cannot now, after you've decimated the flora and fauna, then come and introduce exotic species back into where you have inundated and denuded. He says, oh, that's a knowledge competency. Yeah. We must have the knowledge competencies as well to discern what is called now greenwashing. Now there's another 2-syllable abbreviation that describes greenwashing, but we are not in the appropriate forum for me to say that. So we'll go with greenwashing. And so again, we paint the building green. You know, all the company books green, the receipt books green, everybody have green uniforms. And we said, well, yep, we're on the sustainability bandwagon, we're green. Or we're greenwashing because we cannot, somebody's curious to know what that 2-syllable word is. That's Kamla. But we cannot properly articulate, you know, what we say and we mean by sustainability, circular economy, ESG, and the whole slew of concepts. So because we don't have the depth of the knowledge competency. And that's just on the capacity side. We ain't go to the capability side as yet. So we must also understand the greater degree of depth and the issue of risk, both on the organization, arising from environmental and social fears, and in turn, what are the risks of the organization's impact on these very said spheres in the society? And as corporate secretaries, you will now start, or you should now start to understand that at the strategic level, in the context of sustainability, ESG, circular economy, etc., that you can comprise either the greatest strategic asset to the organization or the biggest strategic liability. Because if we're talking about sustainability and ESG, in your roles as corporate secretaries, as board advisors, and basically having to a certain degree, depending on the culture of your boardroom, if you're afforded the presence and recognition that you duly deserve, you have that in your hand to so guide your board, and by extension, the organization on the sustainability journey. So you need to recognize from a knowledge perspective that important critical role that you have, or potentially can become a risk to the organization. Yeah, we have to understand competency-wise and knowledge-wise the supply chain implications, and my colleagues previously would have spoken a little bit about that. Yeah, and the risk from your uptakers and your off-takers. So here it is, you as a company, you're producing gizmos. You're very proud that your gizmos are very green, and you sell or you off-take your gizmos to a customer or consumer who then uses the said gizmos to create environmental havoc. Where's the contract there? We talk about, and this is in the context of the circular economy, so we talk about the great addition of technology. So everybody have devices and tablets and laptops, and you say, you know what, that eliminates us. You say, oh, you know, I don't have to put gas in my car to come down to CCGI's headquarters to sit in a room with all you lovely people. Now, I would have preferred that, but I'm just saying. So we have Zoom, and we have computers, and we have phones. And for every single minute that we spend here for the next 5 days, do you know how much silicon, plastic, copper, etc. would have gone into the manufacture of the very devices that we are now using? But you know what? ESG, man, he's saving gas. You have to understand that, because there are implications for not understanding that can lead you down the road, especially in the context of GRI standards. And I know this will excite my good friend Rachel and that regulatory framework, because guess what? It is not like your strat plan where you just guess and you say, you know what, we made 100 million last year. I think we should just add 10 million to that and just call it a target. And let's just say we just make 110 million this year. Nobody in comment to ask me why we can't make 100. No. When you say this is the standard and you've done your data and you have to measure against the metrics and what have you, you have to be able to justify very clinically and empirically the results, or speak to account for the results that it's demonstrating. And of course, we have to understand materiality, levels of impact. We have to understand that if you are in a board or in a company, an entity, and you're in your nice paradise of, you know, our Caribbean islands. I know we have a lot of persons from here, from the Caribbean and beyond. But that company is a subsidiary of a parent company that's in a jurisdiction where it's a publicly listed entity and then has to now regulatory. You know, it's going to come down the line. So you have to not only understand the regulatory implications, or perhaps at this stage, we are not as advanced yet there. We're still in the Caribbean getting off the ground, but you still have to understand that foreign regime. Most strategically, you have to understand that once the organization is on that sustainability track, you have to embrace the triple bottom line. Now, several clients, they say, you know, they produce these nice, beautiful sustainability reports. Excellent, copy, imagery, etc. So my question then becomes, so are you no longer a profiter? What are you, an NGO now? Where's the dollars and cents? You know, somebody mentioned in one of the panels earlier about capitalism and it's all about the money. So what are you, an NGO? What are you now part of the UN's FCC system? Why am I saying that? So I come back to the triple bottom line. And what you find happening is most companies, they have two strategies. They have the money-making strategy and the feel-good to the world greenwashing ESG strategy. Yeah? So, you're saying it in big. I'm talking a bit, the chats just keep popping up. Right. So, where was I? Right. So you have these two parallel strategies. The issue there is you can't integrate it. So you have integration paucity in your knowledge. And we don't even start me on the balance scorecard because your balance scorecard, you know, it's not properly structured because you have people indices in finance, you have finance indices in customer, you have customer indices in internal. So you find they go through the process and they become frustrated. I have encountered boards where directors and corporate secretaries don't even understand the business model of the companies that they run. Yes, I have. Sounds strange. Yeah, it happens. I have come across customers who understand the business model of the organization that the boards and the corporate secretaries have charge over. Yeah. So as corporate secretaries and directors, you have to understand that in the context of the governance regime, that among other things will demand the knowledge competency to inform the capability to support your sustainability program, that newsflash number one, it's not just about minute taking and publishing in the newspaper, the responses to SEC and all of those things. You have to understand that governance is an ecosystem. And it's a moving, breathing, active ecosystem. And in short, when people talk about governance, governance breaches and countries in the world governance, it really boils down. The success of governance in its most simplest form boils down to your ability of the organization to not commit three sins. I've written about this. The first is the sin of omission. The second is the sin of commission. And the third is the sin of submission. So when the board / corporate secretary, regulatory authority, whoever they omits to do what they're supposed to do, we all know nature abhors a vacuum. So you create a vacuum for the commission of breaches. And once these commission of breaches occur, and based on, you know, various forms of motivation to get people to submit, people submit. So you have a big whistleblower policy, but everybody's afraid to invoke it. But that's part of your governance. But we preach governance, and this is so you see. So you have to understand those connectedness in your governance ecosystem. It's not just a corporate secretary. You sit on a board, you approve policies, you write some legal something, and no, it's more than that. The second communication competence. Sorry, the second competence is communication. So you have to have the competence and the ability to communicate sustainability and the circular economy to your board, and by extension, your organizational stakeholders. More importantly, the value add. So you have to position yourself as this corporate secretary, my corporate secretary, has the knowledge and can communicate that knowledge to effect the value add required at the board level in the first instance. Your ability to communicate effectively is a function of your own ability, as well as the culture of receptiveness of effective communication at the board level. Particularly for those of us who are corporate secretaries in family-owned businesses, where it probably may have been said, but I'm just trying to be diplomatic. It may not have been said by way of action. That's your seat there. You're not at this table. You're at the side table. When whatever we require of you, we will let you know what you should tell us that we require to do. And if you have a problem with that, well, you know, Because nobody's going to come in here. This family built this business for the last 20, 25 years. Because you feel you have a legal degree, you're going to come here and tell, and you get all of the. So those are the attitudinal aspects of the culture that as corporate secretaries, you might probably find yourself in. You have to know how to navigate that and breach that. And I think it may have been Rachel or Julie who said before that you have to swing it, be able to always swing it back to the bottom line. Say, well, you know, chief, if you do so, either A, it will save us this amount of money, or B, it will make us this more amount of money. That might probably get you in to say, oh, okay. So it's about technique. But if you go in there and you're trying to explain to the chairman of a company that he founded 45 years ago, so of course, everything he does has worked. Nobody can tell him how to build an organization or how to make it resilient. And you are coming in there with these nice concepts of sustainability and ESG and, you know, we are the world and, you know, let's clean up the world and let's do DEI and all of those things. Your objective will encounter a greater degree of resistance because you're not pitching it in the right vein, probably to the right person in the right manner. So you have to understand, and I think in the previous panel, there was a discussion on, you know, how do we take the lead regionally and, you know, sustainability, who does what, how do we come together, et cetera, et cetera. Embedded in there is that whole communication cycle, how you do that. Yeah, so you have to simplify the communication, connect with the person, and bring ownership to it. Mark that turf off. Yeah, we all know what dogs do to trees. Yeah, it's in nature. We just have to mimic that in the corporate world. No, please don't. No, yes, please don't take the example literally, please. But analogously, we understand what I'm saying. We have to you have to assert yourself as that corporate secretary, that knowledge person. I am the difference between whether the regulator shut me down because they fine us. We went and dumped a set of tires in the back of so, and now we had to go and pay a whole set of fines and And you know, for any of us who work and you have to deal with an accountant or a CFO in an organization, the first thing they teach you in ACCA is the following: it's not in the budget. Yeah, so we have to be mindful of these things. Thirdly, in terms of your personal competence, and I come back to where I started. So you have to go beyond the scope of your current knowledge comfort levels. And you have to understand those concepts, the sustainability, circular economy, and all of it in or what I call an organic manner. And you know, getting embedded in it, understanding it, going to your training programs like CCGI and others, you know, we have a number of experts and resources here, you know, within this space for the next week. To the extent that, I mean, we have this right here, this knowledge base, this knowledge pool, and you're going to tell me you're going to sign up for a 5-day course in Harvard. Where's the indigeneity? Where's the knowledge indigeneity? For them to tell us about sustainability and governance in our backyard, when we have CCGI here, and the likes of my fellow panelists and all the panelists that will comprise this session for the week, that's disappointing. I'm just putting it there, it's disappointing. But I know that's not going to happen. So I expect that Kamala will tell me that she has a barrage of calls, you know, meetings that people want to come and you know, engage our indigenous, because we alone could understand our own issues. An Eskimo can't tell us about SIDS, which is small island development states. Yeah, and our issues and sea level rise and, you know, and all of these things, IWRM and all of these things. So let me point to another example. So a couple of years ago, we did a project for the government of Antigua under the IWRM framework with respect to wastewater. Antigua has no national sewage system. It doesn't have rivers, it has guts. On the what is called the riparian zones of these river guts, you have a lot of these, you know, poor persons who live without houses. The water table is very close. It's a small island, so the water table transgresses to the sea level water line. And I said to the Prime Minister then, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, when we did the testing, by the way, for those of you all who like to go up the islands, oh, the water is nice and green and blue and sparkly, it's dirty. I have the lab results test. I told some of the governments if I was in the blackmail business, you know, could disrupt your tourism product, but that will stay here. The point is knowledge. So I said to him, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, do you know that if all it takes is for one tourist to go in that water, develop an itch with a rash, go back to England, gets worse, word spread, and your tourism sector is shut down. Why? Because of ineffective, not understanding that, yes, you have an outhouse, but what the outhouse with the water line close to a gourd that flows into the gourd that flows into the ocean can then destroy your entire economy, which is based on tourism. Yeah, so we have to understand that. We have to understand why it is we don't have pristine beaches in the Gulf of Paria. But we wouldn't have it on the East Coast because we are exposed coastline. Not knowing that the reason why most of the time the Gulf of Paria water is brown is because of some dude who's operating a mine 50 miles up the Essequibo. Do we understand the range and breadth and scope of the expansion of knowledge and competence required? You may very well find as company secretaries, you might spend more time outside the boardroom than inside the boardroom gaining your knowledge. Yeah. So we can, I mean, this is a very exciting topic for me, but time constraints predict otherwise. I hope I haven't offended anyone. So just in conclusion, you know, as corporate secretaries, you want to develop and master your knowledge competencies to the extent that you must forget you're a lawyer. Yeah? Understand the territory of your boardroom, because your ability to impact and impart is in fact determined to a certain extent by that culture in the boardroom. Yeah, and by extension, the organization's culture. Master your communication to provide that value-adding input for convincing the board. Don't give the board the same thing you just Google or you just read in a book. It's not a lecture. You have to take that and, but I mean, for my generation, you know, we read for the award of a degree. Now people Google for a degree. Now they got ChatGPT for a degree. Yeah. So you want to be able to provide that value-added input, convincing your board, convincing your leadership. Yeah. And in terms of your personal competence, seek, as I said before, to go beyond your existing knowledge competencies. If I'm engaging with you, I don't want to be talking to a Kindle audio version of sustainability and ESG. I could play that on Google. I want to hear the depth, the scope, the fertility, yeah, the insightfulness that registers you as a competent corporate secretary with a command of sustainability and ESG, your ability to communicate it effectively to your various publics, and then virally, through your legacy and your impact, maybe we can start getting to the place in the previous panel that we talked about with respect to getting it all together nationally, regionally, and then, well, I don't know what happens after that. I'm kind of like at Antigua, I kind of cut off, yeah? When yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And I will take it back across to you, Nakisha.
Thank you very much, Ermath. The presentations have come full circle with that. You've sort of lit a fire under us to show us more that, you know, it's really our responsibility as corporate secretaries, company secretaries, directors, to take this mantle up and go forward with it. So what I would like to do now is invite our panelists to interact with each other, because I'm sure Rachel and Julie and Ermath may have some questions for each other, as well as the attendees may want to drop some insights in the chat. So I would just like to open up for Julie or Rachel, Ermath, any of you, to share what you think in terms of cross-referencing what each other had shared.
Yeah,
And if I may add, Rachel, just 1 second, let me just add for Nikisha. We are into the last half hour for the session, so we should also invite comments, questions from the participants as well, because I know they have been really engaged with this panel since it started. So yes, and I'm seeing some questions, some comments in the chat with it. But yes, Rachel, go ahead and so a person should know to put their comments or question or raise their hands so we can invite them in.
So I just wanted to say that I'm in full agreement with everything my co-panelists have said in terms of what needs to be thought about, right? But I think it's very important to reference that not everything needs to be thought about by everybody, right? Every sector and every company is in a different area of operation, and different material issues will be impacting them differently, both how the issue impacts the company and also how the company affects the issue, right? So when you're looking at a services company, for example, that has a lot of remote workers and doesn't deal in any kind of physical products, so no logistics, no delivery, no manufacturing, nothing. You know, when you're looking at what their impact is on society, you know, I care more about how they hold the data, right, that they are processing, and cybersecurity and trust issues aligned with that, as well as, oh, look, they're consultants who deal a lot with regulatory bodies and governments. What are their practices like in terms of anti-corruption, anti-bribery, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism finance, etc. So, you know, the different businesses will have different concerns, and the obvious ones may not be applicable to everybody, but everybody has issues to consider, right? So the first question really has to be, and the corporate secretaries can drive this in a business, is, do we understand what our material impacts are on people and the planet? Do we have a sense of what that is as a starting point? Of course, the data, as Ermath mentioned, informs that as you go on your journey. The more data that you have, the more power you have, and the more accurately you can address the impact that you're having, and also optimize your business as a result and make more money and last longer in terms of viability. However, the starting point should really be one of materiality, right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Take a look at, there's a lot of things that are out there already. GRI and SCSB are examples of frameworks and standards bodies that you can consult that have already done a lot of legwork in various sectors. One of them, I think, is SASB, is that right, Ermath? Some 77 sectors, GRI, something sector, you know, that have already been considered and whose operations have already been analyzed and material issues already identified. So leaning on a lot of this legwork is a good starting point. And as a corporate secretary, you do not have to be a sustainability expert with as many years in the field as Ermath in order to grasp what a material issue is to the business that you are leading, you know, and again, see yourself as that leader because you have the great power to guide a conversation. So I'm going to leave my contribution there so we can turn around to the chat and hand back to Nikisha.
Thank you. I have a question I want to put out to the panelists to provoke some discussion. We hear a lot about the mindset of the CorpSec and they needing to understand more that they should lead certain conversations and strategy in the organization. But one of the things that we would have to come to terms with and accept is, over a number of years, various corporate secretaries, not just in one company, but various companies they would have worked with, would have had to endure the relationship where they are only seen as administrative people. And it's almost like being in a relationship where you are used to one thing and you're told that you can only do this, and now your mindset now has to change into evolving. What practical ways can we have CorpSecs evolve out of feeling like, okay, yes, I know I'm supposed to be a leader, but I am not empowered to be a leader? And whilst we have this CCGI that will be offering certain spaces for people to come together and learn certain things, how do we give them the tools to evolve out of a current state of, okay, I'm just administrative, or I just know compliance or the law? How do I diversify, and how do I bring this new growth of my skill into the fore to strategize with directors and the company at large?
So if I may, Keisha, just make a contribution in response. I think that's an excellent question. Given too that it depends on the culture of your board. There are some company secretaries who are still intimidated to make contributions at the board level. Assuming for the moment that they view their role in a particular way, they sit at a side table and they just make the notes and whisper to the chairman or the CEO. But I'm suggesting that we step up, take a seat at the table, and also you rebrand yourself. You have to evolve with the times, you have to evolve with your knowledge, you have to evolve yourself as an advisor. So it calls for a repositioning of the role that you are functioning in. And one of the ways to do that is to start influencing, as we had discussed earlier. So you would want to say to your chairman, I would like to make a presentation. This is a new area. This is a best practice that's going to impact the way we're operating. And I'd like to make a presentation at the next board meeting. I'd like to make a presentation at the next staff meeting. And that's how you start to rebrand yourself and participate in panel discussions and conferences and start to reposition, rebrand yourself and become an influencer in the area and within your company. Very important. You have to, you may find yourself in a situation where you're not asked to elevate. They may bring someone from inside, but you have to take the lead and be the influencer within your organization. You have the knowledge, and so you rebrand and showcase your knowledge and show the benefit to the company of your role, your position.
Thank you very much, Julie. Ermath, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes. I love that, Julie. I love the optimism, and it's really about building and edifying yourself continuously, despite or in spite of the challenges, etc., and the perseverance. But in taking that forward, and this is something that I've actually on the consulting aspect over the years, when people say they come on, the board will listen to me, the chairman will listen to me, they don't take me on, what have you. So I asked two questions. Well, one is actually a point of recognition, and the other is a question. So every 3 to 5 years in your career, you're supposed to do what's called an MOT. You're supposed to arrive at an MOT moment. What is that? Moment of truth. Am I better off in my career 3 years now than I was then? That's the first question you need to probe. The second question you need to ask yourself is, what happens when what I love stops loving me in return? And if you can determine those two questions, that will guide you on the path as to where you should be. But it doesn't mean that you just give up and you stop trying. You mightn't score at that port of call, but the perseverance and the calm of the universe, etc., it will get you to that port where you will be loved. So that's just my take on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Rachel?
Yeah, I think every company has a different culture, right? So we need to remember that, and there's no one size fits all. I think corporate secretaries, as they get to learn the environment that they're in better and better, you will understand what the best ways are in order to achieve your objective, right? So in some companies, it's going to be asking questions, right? That's the way to raise something to the attention of those who need to hear it without feeling like, or making them feel like you're imposing something on them that they will then get defensive of or rebuff, right? Asking questions. Have we thought about the environmental impact of this initiative? Or doing the homework yourself and saying, comparable companies that we tend to benchmark against have done X, Y, and Z. Have we considered that for competitive advantage or to keep up with the market? Asking questions and being inquisitive does two things. It shows that you've put some thought into what's being done, and it will gain you the respect of those who are receiving the information that you're sending. But also it demands a response, right? And when you are asking about matters of impact on people on the planet, due to pure shame alone, people can't just be completely dismissive, or shouldn't, or are less likely to. Let me not be carte blanche about anything. However, it just creates a great opportunity for conversation and for discussion. And where the answer is, well, I'm not too sure, I haven't really thought about it, you can raise your hand and say, well, I've thought about it, I'd love to be able to brief the board on it. I'd love to be able to, at the next meeting, put an item on the agenda. I know an expert who can come to speak to this point specifically, et cetera, you know, but it starts with just that inquisitive curiosity and the asking of questions. In other company cultures, the board of directors is reliant on you to draft the whole agenda and drive the whole meeting, and you could bring who you want. By all means, bring the experts, line things up, you know, wherever you see a gap, make it happen because you don't feel like you can't. But where you do feel like you can't, sometimes it's a matter of identifying who in the organization do you think will be most receptive to the idea and has the authority and ability to take it further, and starting the conversation there, asking them to grab a coffee, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to, everything to do with a board and leadership does not have to happen in the boardroom. These conversations can start elsewhere in environments where you feel more comfortable and where you feel like your message will be better received. So echoing what Ermath had mentioned about communication, I think communication is doesn't always look the same to be effective, right? So you have to have a think around what is the most effective way of communicating some of these sustainability objectives that I believe are applicable, relevant, and important, and make sure you do your homework. Don't go to coffee and then when they have questions for you, you don't know how to answer, right? This is a responsibility that you have if you are going to take the conversation forward.
Okay, excellent. We have some contributions in the chat, not questions, but rather some comments about how effective this presentation has been going and how eye-opening it has been. Kamala, do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, I really love where we have reached with this notion of corporate secretaries needing to understand that they have to be able to develop their influence in the boardroom. And however you may do that. So there have been some really great suggestions put forward here by Rachel and Julie and Ermath in terms of how do you ensure that you introduce the conversations, because the reality is there are several boardrooms where this is not on the agenda. And there may be one or two directors who know a little bit, but most often they may be too busy with whatever is their everyday activity. So when they come to a board meeting, unless it's brought to them or some major thing happens, you're not going to easily see this become part of the discussion. And I really appreciate too the fact that everyone has made it very clear. As a corporate secretary, you have a responsibility to educate yourself first, because you can't want to raise the issue and then be stumped when questions come up. So the competence that you need to build is so deep. That's why, you know, a good corporate secretary is a very special person. A good corporate secretary makes all the difference to the quality of governance in the organization. So you need to be as aware of all of the operations of your organization so you could help the board understand where there may be gaps. And you see some of the things Ermath shared. Well, listen, I do understand where Rachel is coming from, that you don't need to know everything, but listen, you have to expose yourself to learning as much as you can. Because, for instance, I may not even be in the tourism sector, but if there is such an impact, if it is that the waters are not clean and could lead to infections, or it can lead to a shutdown of a certain industry, it impacts me. And so we need to make it a habit to be able to be as informed as possible. It takes time, but that is what needs to happen if you're going to build your skills and competencies as a corporate secretary. And so I'll raise a point here for CCGI. We always have sessions. We are never short on whether they are panel discussions we are hosting, or if they are workshops, or if they are conferences. There are enough opportunities for you to begin to join, be exposed to new ideas, and understand where some gaps may occur. So on that note, I really appreciate Dandra Johnson, who shared in the chat. You know, she's saying to us as a first-time corporate secretary, I am grateful for the information of this session thus far. I appreciate the practical approach rather than a Google lecture style. And thank you very much for that, Dandra, because that is something we try to specialize in here at CCGI. I generally ask our speakers, our panelists, everyone, what you share here should be based on your practical experience. It must be things that someone shouldn't read between the pages of a textbook or just Google and get a list. It's about rich learning and sharing that can really enhance your understanding. So I'm happy that you're looking forward to being engaged with CCGI moving forward. I'm looking forward to everyone who is here joining us and becoming members, because you can be the catalyst for ensuring that we continue this conversation and push it so far forward that we should have more and more organizations like Massey and Answer McCall that is dedicating so much to first pausing, understanding the need for having a complete new shift, understanding that you align to your purpose. And so as Francis would have shared this morning, they were fortunate to have a young, energetic CEO who was aligned to this is the discussion in the current environment. You may not be so fortunate. So you need to find ways to be able to build that conversation in the boardroom. And Francis also gave us an example when she had to approach Mr. Sabga, the original Mr. Sabga, who was not as easy to openness and ideas because he was accustomed to things being done a particular way. A lot of our boardrooms, it is that generation that continue to be there. And a lot of our corporate secretaries are much younger persons. And therefore the challenge will be there in many respects. But I'm hoping that the time that Rachel and Julie and Ermath has taken to reinforce the importance for you to have your competence improve has really underscored that for everyone.
And Kamala, if I could just add one more thing. Today is a very important day in the world of sustainability, because the International Sustainability Standards Board that was brought together by COP26 has finally released the standards that we have been long waiting for. And those standards are in the form of general sustainability disclosures, which they call S1, standard 1, and then S2, which is climate-related disclosures that are very much along the lines of what the Task Force for Climate Change Disclosures had been releasing over the past few years. So the sustainability community is very excited because there have been several governments, about 15 governments across the world, particularly the G20 as well, certain members of them, who have already raised their hands to say, once those standards are released, we are going to force them on our companies, our listed companies, right? So listed companies are going to have to comply with these standards. Now, here's why you care, right? Because you're like, I know Trinidad not in there. You're right, Trinidad not in there, the Caribbean not in there, we ain't reached yet. However, if you are a part of the supply chain of any of these companies, you are their scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions are captured, right? So if you want to continue doing business with these now soon to be regulated by the ISSB standards companies, you need to be able to show certain information to stay on top of the game. So regulation is not coming, regulation is here, and it doesn't have to come in the Caribbean to impact the Caribbean, and we do not want to get left behind. So if your directors need motivation, call me. I'll give you the speech or the email that you're going to send that is full of the facts, and the facts are regulation is here and it is here to stay and it will only grow. So if you don't hop on the train now, you'll have a really hard time chasing it once it leaves the station.
Thank you, Rachel. And you know, that is really welcome news, because bringing those standards together was so important. We have had presentations on it before, and what is commonly referred to everyone now is the fact that there used to exist an alphabet soup. You didn't know which standard to follow because every country, every global organization had their own way of determining measurements and stuff. So a common standard is a really welcome development, and you all can be very sure that for our global conference later this year, we'll have a presentation on it. So that's something to look forward to. And I see we have put in the chat, thank you, Joanne, the survey for today's feedback. If you have not already done so, or even if you did and you want to give feedback on this panel, please make sure that you click on that link and you provide feedback to us. And I have a question I want to ask you guys. We are scheduled for a break from 4:30 to 5, but we have Nandi Mandela with us. And I know if we wait towards the end of today, then it's going to be very late in the night for Nandi. So I'm wondering if we can forego a bit of that break and ask Nandi if she could join us for a little bit. And if that's all right with you guys, we could possibly end the panel formally here now and then re-engage our conversation with Nandi so everyone can continue to log in and be involved in it. Yes, okay, good. I'm seeing a few nods, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
Good. So Nikisha, you can ask the panelists to give their closing remarks. So Julie and Rachel, no closing remarks, and then we close off the panel formally and then go to Nandi to ask her for some examples to share with us.
Yeah, so we could start with Rachel. So just give some closing remarks, then Julie, then Ermath.
Okay. In closing, I encourage you to inform yourself to the extent that you can on what is pertinent in the sustainability arena to the companies that you work for or with. Information overload doesn't help anybody, but maybe pick an issue that you really believe in. Having a little passion about something is also very, very handy. It drives you in the hard times. So if it is you're passionate about abating the climate crisis, and you want to take a focus on those climate related disclosures and reducing emissions and so on, go online, hop online. There's a wealth of information available to you, and ask questions and lean on the experts who have put years and years of time and effort into this to truly understand what it's about, and they can help you and they can guide you in that process. Bring them to your boards, bring them to your operational management teams, and really make knowledge and data the basis of your sustainability efforts, so they don't stay aspirational, they actually get done.
Thank you.
So I'd commend you all to rebrand yourselves, be the change agent and the influencer within your organization. Remember, your role is just a title, it does not define you. You define your role and you define your title. So acquire your key competencies, influence and lead. You're an advisor, you're no longer a minute taker. And I would like to leave and part with this, that while we're looking at sustainability from an environmental perspective, do not underestimate and do not forget that sustainability is undergirded by ethical practices. And that's a key driver too of a company's long-term financial viability and sustainability. Ethical practices. Ensure that you have a code of conduct that deals with people, resources, products, your stakeholders generally. Go forth and prosper, and remember your role is defined by you. Rebrand yourself and make an impact and influence. Thank you.
Okay, my concluding comments will not be controversial. So all I want to say, guys, first of all, thank you very much. It's been wonderful. And I want us to take into consideration, and this is just today's day one. I've navigated day one. I have a very nice feeling on day one. If any of you guys are feeling like the way I'm feeling, I feel like Captain Environment, I feel like a superhero. I feel charged. I feel hopeful. I feel optimistic. And I feel that way because listening to the feature address, the panelists, the level of attention, the questions, the comments coming from the participants, and I'm thinking, listen, if we can sustain the interest, sustain the drive, sustain the perseverance, keep going after it. You mightn't score with your first board, your first chairman, your first, foray into getting it, but just keep it going. Just keep going one foot in front of the other and keep going towards it. And that way, when it becomes muscle memory, it then becomes collective muscle memory. When it becomes collective muscle memory, you start building a legacy. More importantly, what we have to determine is like insurance. When you take out an insurance policy, the sum insured is money that you will never see. Similarly, ladies and gentlemen, if we invest now in sustainability, the outcomes we can only dream about because we won't be around to experience this with grandchildren. So we invest in as professionals in our careers, literally in creating that place and space for sustainable existence of our grandchildren or great-grandchildren. So I urge you as, you know, professionals, sustainability professionals, corporate secretaries, directors, etc., keep the fire pumping, keep it going. You have CCGI there as that, you know, shoulder to lean on, that go-to kind of thing. We have a myriad of all the moderators and the panelists and experts, and we have it right here. Yeah. So good luck.
Thank you very much. Kamala, on to you.
Thank you, Nikisha. So I'd like to thank you sincerely for moderating. Thank Rachel, Julie, and Ermath for some really brilliant contributions today as well. And I want to say that I think you guys too have now, we've been building so nicely from the beginning with Francis this morning to now. And the discussion has certainly opened the floor to the third panel, which is going to look at challenges for the corporate secretary in a VUCA world. Because the reality is we are dealing with that volatility and that uncertainty, the complexity. It's affecting us too. So how do we navigate that? So that's going to be the challenge that's addressed by the next panel. So thank you so much. Now, as I said, I shared a few minutes ago, we will not go on our break. Instead, I want to welcome Nandi. I'm so happy you've joined us again today. And to share with us a little bit, some more thoughts in terms of some of the practical examples too of what's happening in South Africa.
Kamala, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and it's evening this side in South Africa. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I just want to also congratulate the panel that has just finished. I keep learning with each, presenter and delegate that has been here today, and many other connections that I've had on the CCGI network. The example that I'm going to be giving is not going to fit nicely into the ESG framework. It touches briefly on the S, which is the sustainability. And it's an example of how government has partnered with business. The government has developed a framework and a policy framework of transformation. The reason for that is because 80% of the population in South Africa has been excluded in doing business. They've been relegated to jobs like cleaning and menial jobs in the economy. So there were no opportunities for people to be engaged in being businesses. So this policy for government is to say all government contracts, whether it's construction, whether it's supplies, or any type of contracts from government, 30% of that contract, if you bid for the work in the private sector, 30% of that is going to go to, we call them previously disadvantaged communities. It's part of the Black Economic Empowerment Plan, where the private sector is not going to be business as usual, but you're going to make sure that if you have a business contract, a government contract, you're going to take 30% of the value of that contract and make sure that you empower people around the community where that a business will take place. I have the honor of being one of the stakeholder engagement specialist on the project of upgrading a major highway which leads from the harbor to different parts of South Africa and beyond our borders into Southern Africa and the rest of Africa. It's one of the biggest projects currently in the country. And it just shows that if you have clear policy, a clear implementation plan, and you have monitoring mechanisms that gets reevaluated from time to time as the project unfolds, you can actually have real progress. And And the government is currently, with great reluctance from the private sector, almost forcing this, down their throats. A private sector is not too happy about this because they would have wanted to have the 100% being a profit in their bottom line. So the main objective of why government is actually enforcing this policy is to ensure that it addresses unemployment and poverty. They actually have targets, they put targets in place of saying, I'm just going to make a practical example on this project. It's 4.2 billion rands, which is an equivalent of 230 million rand. Sorry, $230 million. So 30% of that would be 64.8 million. And that's the 30% that has to stay with the local community. They have targets for labor. They also have targets for enterprises, small, micro, and medium enterprises. The value of the labor component is about 17.3 million that has to stay behind in that community. They have a framework plan of how they can monitor this. We actually sit on a monthly basis in a structure called the Public Liaison Committee, where you have different people that sit on that structure. There is a policy document, and part of the policy document has what is called a 14-point plan. And that is what we as stakeholder engagement people are monitoring. So the contractor feels the pressure from the client above. They feel the pressure in the middle, which is ourselves. Our role is to monitor whether they are meeting those targets on a monthly basis. And they also have pressure from the community that says, we know that there's 30% of the value of the project that has to stay behind in this community in terms of job opportunities and in terms of enterprise development opportunities. If the contractor doesn't meet any of these targets, they are fined. It's part of their contract, it's not negotiable, and the 30% that has to stay behind in that community is also not negotiable. South Africa has a very militant labor force that is influenced by our past of apartheid. South Africa has 80% Black population and 20% divided between Indian, South African of Indian origin, and colors. I think you guys call it mulati. So 80% of the population was excluded from economic opportunities in the past. They needed only to be laborers, except of course for teachers, nurses, and doctors. But in terms of the different types of businesses, we were excluded from that. So what is the target? They actually have broken down the target between targeted labor and targeted enterprises. From the business front, the 30%, it has to go to women-owned construction companies. This is an upgrade of the major highway in Durban on the East Coast. It has to go, part of that 30% has to go to youth-owned companies. A portion of that, I think about 0.5% goes to communities that are with people with disabilities. The business forums in the area have small, medium enterprises that need to be given an opportunity. South Africa has a grading system where entry-level construction companies called a grade 1 up to grade 9. The companies that actually do the most complex civil construction work, like your big bridges and things like that. So the idea is that the bigger companies will actually hold by the hand a small grade 1 company, and this is a 5-year project. So by the time the project finishes, they want to make sure that the company that started as a grade 1 finishes, when the project finishes, they have graduated to the next level. So that's part of the monitoring. And the monitoring is done on a monthly basis. The PLC has a very, very extensive role. They sit every month to monitor how they are performing. And if they don't perform, they get fines. from the government. Part of what is the monitoring mechanisms that at the beginning of the project, during the establishment of the main contractor, they had to do a skills analysis gap for both labor and SMME. So this partnership goes beyond the client. The Department of Labor, where people go to register for being unemployed, is part of the team that is working with us. We, as the stakeholder engagement specialists on this project, our role was to work with the Department of Labor to determine what will be the 5 kilometer radius, which communities are located closest to the project. And we insisted as part of the process that labor opportunities will go to those communities within the 5 kilometer radius. And unless the skill cannot be found in that area, then opportunities will be opened to the 10 kilometer radius. And so it goes on, so that we can make sure that people don't sit over the fence and watch other people make money on their backyard. So that seems to be working very well because, and if you don't have the skill, of course, you're not going to be appointed. You need to have the prerequisite skills. But for general labor, people that actually do menial work, all the employment has to come from the closest communities. Because I had already said that South Africa has a very militant labor force, employed and unemployed. So if people feel that they're being left out, they will go and cause a work stoppage. So it's part of the mitigating factors because we have to deliver on the project while we also make sure that the communities are not left behind. They benefit not only on CSR, community social reports or programs, but they also benefit financially by building themselves up and becoming serious entrepreneurs. The skills gap helps to train people. Another government agency, which is focusing on training, will also take some of the grade 1 contractors, and 2 days in a week will be spent in a classroom where they get taught how to manage financial management of the contract. They're also being taught to say, if you graduate from grade 1, if you want to take advantage of opportunities in grade 2, this is how you complete a tender document. This is how you price a document and all of those. So there's an opportunity for graduating opportunities for people that are in those projects. Monthly monitoring, I've already mentioned that. And again, our role, we have an oversight role on the contractor to make sure that they meet the targets. No advert goes into the public domain without it going to this body that has been set up to monitor on a monthly basis. If there's a need for us to meet more than once a month, then we actually call a special meeting just to make sure that the construction plan that has been tabled at the PLC is adhered to, and the implementation, there needs to be a combination between what is planned and what is being implemented. And when that doesn't happen, then the contractor again is penalized for that. There is a person that has been employed to do nothing else but to be a link between the community and the contractor to make sure that people are aware of the opportunities that are coming online. And lastly, because I know I'm standing between you and your break, there also are other opportunities for the circular economy. What many people regard as waste, we are currently exploring ways of how that can be used to further empower and give opportunities to especially unemployed graduates and unemployed youth, so that they can use that for projects within their communities and start their own small businesses. And the contract, as part of their contract, the agreement with the government or the client, they have to make sure that there is a social responsibility project that is available for that community. And we are also having bilaterals with the different stakeholder groups that sit on the PLC, the project liaison committee, the women, the youth. They're not there for themselves. They are there to represent their constituencies. For every piece of information that is communicated at the PLC is disseminated within those different constituencies. It took about 5 to 7 years to develop the policy, and it is now almost regarded as a Bible by the company that is actually implementing it. So I thought it would be worth sharing because we can use, if you don't have a better model, you can also try to see how this can be useful for your industry, if there are some lessons that can be learned. Thank you so much, Cam, for allowing me to share my experience in trying to ensure that we do our little bit in our small corners or big corners to have a different future, because this will not just stay with these current beneficiaries, which are the local labor and the local enterprises, but also it becomes a legacy that they create for their children, their children's future. Thank you.